All right. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to cover essentially four things. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the three huge questions you need to ask yourself before you even start about thinking about moving on. Either you've made the decision that it's time to go or you're getting really close. Okay. So we're going to talk about three questions you need to ask yourself. Then we're going to talk about four huge mistakes that pastors and church staff make when they're moving on a lot of times. We're going to talk about five things you really need to zone in to your next potential church. And then we're going to talk about next steps. And I've got three of those for you as well. I'm Todd. I am one of the co-founders over at Chemistry Staffing. I've been working in ministry over 30 years and been working for about 25 or 30 years, specifically in staffing and transitions and all of that. That's really where my heart is and where my passion is. It all started back about 25 years ago when I started a website called churchstaffing.com, which is still in existence. They're still doing great. And they were the first step that I took to get into the whole staffing world. And also, if you haven't found the Healthy Church Staff podcast yet, I do that every day. Okay. So how do you know when it's time to move on? As we get started today, I'm going to show you a really quick video. So watch this video and then we'll get started right away.
It's just, there's all this pressure. And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head. And it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. That's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. You do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on? We can work it out. We can work it out.
Okay, I don't know how many of you have seen that video before, but that video cracks me up every time. And I thought that would be a great way to start our time together here today, because honestly, what we're trying to do here, we're talking about a really sensitive subject. How to know when it's time to move on and how to do that really, and what do you need to do before you go. And what I don't want you to think is that this webinar is I'm not going to be able to fix everything, okay? But at the same time, there may be a nail in your head and you're trying to figure things out. So what I want to do is I want to listen. I want to share some things with you as well today, and just know that this is a deeply personal matter when you decide to move on from ministry. And are there any, I can't tell you exactly what to do, but hopefully what we're going to share today will give you some insight and some direction as to how to make a good decision. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our very first part of the topic. And that is the big idea of leaving your church doesn't change you. And here's what I'm really wanting to get at here is, if you don't do the inner work, if you don't do that really hard work, you're going to bring the same struggles with you to your new church that you probably had at your last church. So let's start with a little bit of introspection. And again, this first part is, we're back where we are in where you are, hopefully, is either you've decided, hey, I think it's time to move on, but I'm not sure where I'm going yet. Or it could be that you've decided to move on and you're already talking to churches. Okay. So either place that you're in, I think this section is going to be really helpful for you. But always start with a little bit of introspection when you're thinking about going. Okay. And the first question I want you to ask is, why do I want to leave? Okay. Why do I want to leave? And the reason that you want to ask this question is because the answer to that question, the clarity that you bring to that question is going to help you to make a wise decision. Okay. So here's the question. And we mentioned this on the webinar last month. These are two questions that I like to ask people when they're right where a lot of you are today. And the first question is, am I running towards something? And the second question is, I guess it's just one question. Am I running towards something or am I running away from something? Leaving just to fix or escape frustration doesn't fix the core issue. What you really need to ask here is you think, okay, I'm going to go. And as you start to talk to churches, new churches, and look at new opportunities, the question you really need to ask yourself is, how will I be different in my new role? And it's really important that you take the time to ask that question. How will I be different? Obviously, you're going to move into a different role. You maybe a different city, maybe a different state. Maybe it feels like a new start and a new opportunity. But chances are you're still going to be you. So you need to do a pretty good introspective look to say, am I running from something or am I running to something? And how will I be different in my next role? And here's the clue, though. If you ask that question to yourself and your answer is unclear, you may not be ready for the move. Okay. You may be ready for the move, yeah, but you might not be ready yet to actually make the move. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is it's similar. The second question is, what's really driving my decision? There's healthy reasons to move and there's unhealthy reasons to move. Some of the healthy reasons, maybe you're looking for a growth opportunity. Maybe you're in a church right now that doesn't seem really well aligned, maybe culturally to you or theologically to you. And the church that you're looking at it just seems to be a much better fit. Maybe God has called you to a mission, or you have a special calling that you just feel really crystal clear that God is calling you to do that. Those are really good reasons and really healthy reasons to move. But there's also some unhealthy reasons to move. And we talked about that before. And sometimes when you identify the reasons that you're looking to move, it could be that you're running towards something or you're running away from something. Unhealthy issues, these are the things a lot of times that we run away from. And I think we've all been there at some point in our ministry. Burnout, if you're just so tired and you're just like, man, if I just had something different, I wouldn't be so tired anymore. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe there's conflict and you're just like, I can't deal with conflict anymore. It's time to go someplace that doesn't have any conflict. Good luck with that. Every church has conflicts, but if you're leaving just to get away from conflict, that might not be the healthiest reason. And then, man, I talk with candidates all day, every day sometimes, and desperation, I can tell usually within 2 or 3 minutes of talking with a candidate, their level of desperation. And when you get to the point of desperation, it's a really tough route to go to be able to land healthy where you go next. Okay, so that's really the second question. The third question, and I think this is really important, and this question comes into play. Okay, now we're really starting to zone in. Now you're talking to a specific church. You're thinking, okay, is this the church that God's calling me to? Is this the church I want to move my family to and invest in the community and the church and have my kids in their schools and all that? Here's a really good question to ask you at this point is, can I love this church as it is? Can I love this church as it is? Because here's the truth. If you're only excited about what you want to change, if I could just get away from the conflict, if I could just get out of here because I'm so burned out, if I could just get someplace different. If you're only excited about what you want to change currently, you're probably setting yourself up for a good level of disappointment. Okay. And many pastors and church staff walk into deep dysfunction that they didn't see coming. And we're going to talk about that. If you're like, oh yeah, that's me. We're going to talk about that here in a second. Okay. So that's the first part. The second part I want to talk about are some of the biggest mistakes. And I think I don't remember if I said 4 or 5 biggest mistakes that pastors and church staff make when they're moving. And here's the big idea here. Most bad transitions happen because you're not asking the right questions up front. Okay. So again, we've determined that we're going to move. We're already talking to a church. Matter of fact, these are some questions and some things that you need to determine before you say yes. Okay. So during the interview process, when you make a site visit, those kind of things. Most bad transitions happen because you just don't ask the questions up front. Okay. So question number one, or mistake number one. Okay. Ignoring the church's history. Okay. Every church has patterns of dysfunction. Every single church has patterns of dysfunction. There is no absolutely flaw-proof church. Okay. But here's what you can ask. And these questions, you need to take these questions and massage them. You don't want to ask these questions exactly like I've worded them here, but you have to work these into your conversation and into your interviews as best you can. If you go in there and you lay all of these right out, it's not going to go well for you. But if you can work these into your conversation, these are things you really need to know to avoid these mistakes. First question to ask is, what's the story of the last three pastors? If you're a senior pastor, it's not out of line to say, tell me about your last pastor. Tell me about your last three pastors. It all goes a little bit into the history of the church. If you're a worship guy or gal, say, hey, tell me about the last couple people that have led worship here. What did you like about them? What didn't go well? And not just listen to their answers, but read their body language as well. Are they open? Are they openly sharing? You can tell when somebody's, hey, we don't have any secrets. We don't have any skeletons here. Or you can tell if they're guarded. Okay. So it's not just what they say, but probably how they say it. All right. So here's the red flag though. It's funny. On mine, it shows as red, but on yours, it shows as blue. So I don't know. Here's the flag. Okay. If there's a cycle of short tenures in the staff overall, or particularly in the position that you're looking to be hired for, if there's a cycle of short tenures, if there's evidence of some major conflict or division, you really do need to proceed with caution. Okay. Those flags come up. It doesn't mean that you don't take the job, but it means that you need to dig in a little bit there. You don't want to be surprised when you get there. All right. So that's mistake. Mistake number one is ignoring the church's history. Mistake number two is believing in an unrealistic vision. Okay. Here is the truth. And I could tell you story upon story that I hear during interviews. Churches often overpromise when they're hiring. I remember one guy we were talking with, and he's, I've been at this church for 6 months, and they lied to me, Todd. They said that there were 500 people that came to this church, and my first Sunday here, there were like less than 50 people in the worship center. And I'm like, okay, so two things happened there. Okay. Number one, the church overpromised and underdelivered what was actually going on there. But number two, so the church absolutely in the wrong there. But number two, this person took this job. Evidently, he didn't visit a service on a Sunday morning, or maybe they just had an off Sunday or what, but he didn't ask the right questions. He made this mistake. So you always you don't want to believe everything, but you want to fact check, okay? Because they're getting to know you and you're getting to know them. So here's what you can ask is ask actually what their actual track record is. And if they're comparing themselves to somebody else rather than saying how things have gone there, if they're comparing themselves to a megachurch or one across town, that could be a red flag. Okay. So make sure that you get a realistic picture of where they are. Okay. Mistake number three, overestimating your influence. Okay. That sounds negative, Todd. What are you talking about there? Here's the reality is pastors don't change cultures overnight. Okay. So here's what I would ask. What's something that this church has truly changed in the last 5 years? Right? Because whatever area ministry you're moving into, there has to be some movement, right? They're bringing a new person on. Either there were some problems where they need to hire a new person, or maybe it was a great transition. But you need to ask, hey, how is the worship ministry, how has the youth ministry changed in the past 5 years? And here's the red flag. If they've never actually changed, you won't be the one to suddenly make it happen. That's just the reality of it. Churches, again, going back to this mistake number two, churches like to say, hey, we just need a leader that can help us change. That's rosy talk sometimes. And if they've actually not ever done anything to change in the past 5 years, if they can't tell you an area that they've changed and you think you're going to go in there and change them, you probably don't have a really good read on that church, or you're overestimating what influence you probably could have, at least initially. Okay, so that's number three. Number four mistake is walking into a leadership mess. And here, what you're going to want to do is figure out, how does the church handle conflict? Every church has conflict, but how does the church handle conflict when they have it? And here's one of those questions. Again, you don't want to ask this question exactly like it's worded here, but it's something that you can work into conversations and ask when you're with the elders or the board. You can ask a certain way. If you're with the staff, you can ask a certain way. If you're with somebody in the key volunteer, you can ask this: what's a major disagreement that the elders and staff have had in the past year, and how did they resolve it? Now, if they tell you that there's not been any disagreements, or there's that might be a yellow flag. Dig in there a little bit. If they haven't had anything in the past year, maybe say the last 3 years or the last 5 years, there has to be some area of disagreement. And that's not the issue. Disagreements and conflict is okay because every church has it, but you need to know how they actually handled the conflict. And here's the key: if they dodge the question, you might be stepping into a really deeply dysfunctional culture. Again, it's just your spidey senses should just start to tingle a little bit. And again, listen to what they're saying, and watch the body language as to how they're saying it. And if they just seem to you to be really dodgy, like they don't want to answer the question about how they've handled conflict, that's something to really take note of anyway, and continue to ask some questions. Okay. I feel like I'm zooming right through here. All right. The next part of our webinar, last part actually, is how to avoid walking into a bad situation. Here's the big idea for this section. Okay. You are not just being interviewed by them. You're interviewing them too. Okay. So you go into a job interview and you think, okay, they're interviewing me. That is absolutely true. But you do need to know that you are interviewing them as well. And hopefully during every job interview, at the end, they always say, whether they want you to ask questions or not, they always say, what questions do you have of us? I'm talking more than that. We just mentioned some questions that you should ask, but it's really important just a mindset you go in. So this is how I would say: use suspicion sparingly, but wisely. Okay. So use suspicion sparingly, but wisely. So hope is great, but too much optimism could really blind you from seeing some of the problems. We talked about some of that in the last section. Assume that some things won't change and ask, can I still thrive here? So as you start to learn more about the church, you're going to find some things that you're going to get really excited about, and you're going to find some things that you're going to learn that don't excite you at all. And your first tendency as a leader is going to be, okay, that's okay, I can change that. But here's the reality of it: you need to assume that some things are not going to change. Matter of fact, nothing's going to change on day one, at least through day 90. We always tell people, don't make any changes in your first 3 months. Okay. When those things don't change, you need to ask yourself, can I still thrive there? Is this someplace where I can thrive? Okay. So there are some key areas to investigate. We're going to talk about financial health really quickly, leadership structure, and staff culture. Okay. We're going to zip right through these pretty quick. Financial health, you can find out and ask. And again, don't feel like you got to do all. These are not all first round interview questions. These might be second round or third round, or when because so many churches are doing Zoom interviews now. So you're doing more interviews. Could be on your first site visit where some of these, particularly the financial questions, come in. But one of the financial questions is, what's the budget trend been over the last 3 years? Okay. If giving is declining, one of the things that you can expect, you can take the last 3 years of financial decline and extrapolate that onto the next 3 years. And this isn't always the case, but you can expect, if the giving has been declining, that there's going to be some amount of financial pressure and financial strain moving forward. Okay. Leadership structure. Ask, what kind of decisions require board approval? Okay. What kind of questions, what kind of things need to come to the board? What can I do and what can't I do without your approval? And here, the answer, here's why it's important, is if everything is micromanaged, If everything has to get a board approval, if you have to get board approval for a $20 gas bill or a book expenditure or something, if everything is micromanaged, you're going to be stuck fighting for small changes. Okay. You as a leader want to go in and you want to make some changes and you want to be able to move the church toward the future. But if you're stuck taking absolutely everything and everything is micromanaged, taking everything to the board, you're going to be stuck fighting. You might be able to do the change, but it's going to be much, much harder if everything is micromanaged. So try and drill down and see what their culture is as far as leadership structure. And then as far as staff culture, and this is something I wouldn't ask this question, but you can observe this, right? What do the elders, what did the board, what did the staff, the senior pastor, what did the staff say about other staff when they're not in the room? Okay. You're going to have a really interesting seat because during your interviews, you're not on the team yet, but you may be on the team soon. So if you hear things like, you're going to have to work with this guy, but sometimes he doesn't really do all that, watch how not only what they say about each other when they're talking to you individually, but watch how they interact with each other when they're in the room. That is just really incredibly important. And if there's a pattern of blame and you pick that up during a job interview, it's only going to be worse when you're a part of the team. Okay. So if there's a pattern of blame, you can expect toxicity when you get there. It's almost a guarantee. So one simple test, I think this is really good. And you can't base your decision solely on this question, but I think it's an important one to consider. Really simple. Would I attend this church if I wasn't on staff? Now, it could be that as the church is right now, I don't know if I would, but I think it's got potential and God's leading me there. And this is what it's going to be. And it's going to be a great place for me to minister to my family. That's one thing. The other thing is, man, there ain't no way I'd ever go to this church if I wasn't on staff. I hear that from staff people all the time that are on staff. And that goes back to the desperation we were talking about. If I wasn't being paid, I would not go here. I would not bring my family here. You don't want to get into that situation. You just don't. Okay. So if the answer isn't an enthusiastic yes, at least that should be a flag for you to work through as you're going. Okay. So as we close here, and then I'm going to get on to the next steps. Okay. Making a move isn't just about leaving. It's about stepping into the right place. Stepping into the right place is incredibly important. I know each of you that are watching are at a different point in your ministry journey. Okay. It is not uncommon for us to talk to people that are looking for a job that are in their late 20s and early 30s, and they're already looking at their third church. And a lot of times it's because they've made these mistakes that we talked about today, and they found out 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months in, this is not a good place for me. I'm drowning and I need to find something different. Okay. If you take the time to start with the introspection, start with asking some of the questions, start with making sure that you don't make those mistakes that we talked about today as a start, there's a lot better chance that you're going to find some place where you can be. At chemistry, we call it a healthy long-term fit. When we talk about healthy long-term fits, we're talking about, can you stay at this church for 5 years? Okay, 5 years or more. Do I feel like I can move my family here and minister effectively in this church for 5 years or more? And I should have actually put that question in this presentation, because that's a huge one. If you don't feel like you can serve at this church, if you don't think there's a possibility that you could be there for 5 years, that's a huge red flag. And I think you may want to reconsider before you sign on the dotted line for that. We have, hundreds of blog posts about every topic imaginable with transition and church staffing. So you can check that out. That's all free. You can go to chemistrystaffing.com/podcast. I just recorded the 300th episode. They're all like 5 to 8 minutes long, bite-sized pieces, but we talk a lot about staffing issues and what to do when you're fired and all those kind of things that I think you're going to find. Whatever you're going through, you're probably going to find some kind of a resource that we've written about or done a podcast on or something like that. This is the mic drop for today. Don't let desperation drive your decision. Ask the hard questions. Do the inner work. The next best step is the one that you make with wisdom and with clarity and with confidence. just know that all of us here at Chemistry Staffing, we're on your side. We're for you. We have a special place in our hearts, and we've actually given our lives to minister to people that are in transition, and transition is never fun. I've never had, in the 25 to 30 years I've been doing this, I've never had somebody come up to me and say, this whole job search transition thing, I just absolutely love it. It's the time where you find yourself the most vulnerable. It's the time where you find yourself asking a lot of really important questions. It's time where you make decisions that affect your future and your family, where you go to church and where you have a church job for the next 5 to 10 years could mean who your future son-in-law and daughter-in-law and grandkids are. This is some heavy stuff. So if there's any way that we can help you, you can always reach out to me. You always find any kind of help that you can at chemistrystaffing.com as well. Thanks so much.